There are 15 people signed up, so some other people might be trickling in, but if not, then they will get the recording. So I'm looking forward to getting started with you guys. Rachel was supposed to be here. She's an ADHD therapist here in Atlanta, Georgia. She works in my practice, and she got really sick this morning, and turns out she has COVID. So we will be thinking about her and hoping that she doesn't get very sick. So we are learning, thank you, Max. We are learning that ADHD and chronic pain are highly linked. This workshop is, hold on, let me actually, since we're right at the beginning here, we're just getting started. Somebody's just joining us. Just as a reminder, this is recorded. It will be uploaded to different platforms. So if you want to change your name or stay off camera, totally up to you. It's your anonymity if you want it. So a lot of the studies are showing us that ADHD and chronic pain are highly linked. Why? We don't fully know. There's a lot of different theories out there. And remember that research is always really limited in a lot of ways. And so until we have lots and lots and lots of research studies saying the same thing, we stay a little bit weary about what the truth of the matter is. But what we do know is that often folks who are diagnosed with things like fibromyalgia, chronic migraines, lower back pain, often either have a history of ADHD in childhood or they were undiagnosed. Not always, but that's just a very high correlation that we see. Here are some of the ideas as to why. Again, this is not a foolproof exact. You should always take what's being said and apply it through the lens of your own life and make sure that it actually resonates with your own experience. So what we know is that it's really common for people with ADHD to have heightened muscle tone, and this contributes to chronic pain. That's a lot of heightened muscle tone where things are really tight, and this can contribute to, you're always bracing, you're always tight. So keep in mind, we're going to talk about relaxation a little bit later on. But if you have a heightened muscle tone, it is inherently harder for you to relax. So a lot of the common advice that we see in either ADHD, the ADHD world, chronic pain, chronic illness, you'll see that people swear by things like, this absolutely works. And the reason why it's so important to apply it through your own lens is because every body is completely different. So the way that your heightened muscle tone even portrays in your body might be different than how it looks in mine. And you have to think too about how much practice someone has had with something before they start to say, hey, this is like the best thing ever. Practice does give more of a, you have to practice something for a little while to really know if it's going to work or not work. So another hypothesis that we have is around the neural pathways. So we're starting to realize that some of the same neural pathways used in the process of attention is also the same neural pathways that are used in the way our body processes and feels pain. So basically, chronic pain and ADHD share the same neural pathway systems, and they just can often even feel really intertwined. And it's hard to know sometimes, is this ADHD? Is this chronic pain? Is this a rough night's sleep? Like it can be hard to distinguish. And one thing I hope you gain from any of my workshops is that it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, it doesn't matter what exactly the root cause reason is for something. Sometimes finding the root cause can help you get the proper treatment, and that's great. But other times we can either beat ourselves up or we can try really hard to be figuring something out that maybe we're not going to figure out. And it's better to just figure out how to work with and soothe that part of yourself than to figure out why to then try to eradicate the problem. One of the newer hypotheses is around neuroinflammation. I'm really careful around this hypothesis because inflammation gets really tied to diet, and it can also, and I'm all for eating a good, healthy, mostly whole foods based diet. When I say whole foods, I just mean like fruits and vegetables and as much as you possibly can. I'm all for that. And also, it's not the end all be all. We know that. There are plenty of people who change their diet and nothing changes for them. And so I just think, again, it's important to be careful with all of these theories. And if you go down the inflammation route and you go down the diet route, it can quickly lead to disordered eating and then not getting enough calories. And we actually know that getting enough calories is way more important than getting the right calories. That's for energy, for clarity of mind, all of that. Okay, so pain requires focus. Like, it takes all of your focus when you're in pain. And then this can make it harder to concentrate on other things. And so that's why some of these things with ADHD and chronic pain, it can start to feel like it overlaps and it's confusing. If I'm consumed by my pain, it's hard to think about anything else. And then studies have shown that people with chronic pain often have trouble switching their attention and filtering out distractions. And this is because that pain is competing for the same mental resources that are needed for the attention. We also know chronic pain changes the way that the brain works over time. It starts to physically change your brain structure, and that makes it harder to think clearly. The good news about that, that can sound really scary, is that we can also reverse changes in the brain. Not all changes, but the brain is malleable. That's why we call it, say, neuroplastic, because it can ebb and flow and shift and change in one way or another. And the chemicals released in response to pain can also impair cognitive function, which again can then resemble ADHD. These are just some of my own kind of theories as to why this is such a huge issue. This is less about the neuroscience and more about how our society operates. So, for one, I think the 40-hour work week is totally unsustainable, but most of us have to live in it. And there are things that you can do to navigate life when you still have to work a 40-hour work week. Nothing makes you doomed. If we're talking about the 40-hour work week being detrimental, it doesn't mean that you are in peril if that's what you have to do. Because also, making money to make a living and survive in this country is also something that is good for us. There are pros and cons to pretty much everything, and we don't want to get too focused on one detail that makes you feel like, yeah, you're doomed if that's what you have to do for other reasons. Another thing I think contributes a lot to chronic pain specifically is working like machines. Even if we work jobs that require us to stand or walk, it's often very repetitive movements, um, very rigid. But most of us also have jobs where we're sitting all day, and just not moving the way that we really should for optimal health. Even just working inside all day without sun, most of us are like chronically depleted. And vitamin D is a big contributor to a lot of different immune functions. So we need vitamin D in order for other things to properly function. The other thing I think a lot about is just our lack of appreciation for creativity and rest and socializing. We no longer have these daily, easy places to go to socialize. This is often referred to as third places. People would have work, home, and then a third place where they would meet at multiple times a week or a month. This could be parks or different activities, even religious, like church and stuff like that. And a lot of these things are no longer just embedded in our daily routines. And so, in order for us to have these in our lives, we have to seek them out, which requires energy, which means when we're low on energy, we're not going to do them. So, it becomes this really vicious cycle. Also, we have never ending to do lists. And again, my opinion is this is due to non existent village and community. We used to live in communities and villages where people helped each other. One person might be cooking while another person might be doing laundry, while another person might be out hunting, and everybody worked together to feed the village. And now we're all doing all of these tasks all on our own. And I think it contributes to a lot of the issues that we see when we live with both ADHD and chronic pain. For chronic pain, it's one, we can't do as much as we can when we're not in pain. Our energy levels are lower, things hurt, they're harder to do. And then I'll talk a little bit more about the ADHD concept around this a little bit later. And as I mentioned earlier, most people are misdiagnosed, either especially assigned female at birth. you likely did not get a diagnosis with ADHD as a kid. Some absolutely, yes, did, but most didn't. And whether that's good, bad, I don't know. The treatment has changed so much over the years that it's not inherently, we don't know that you would have gotten the right treatment anyway if you had been diagnosed early on. So again, nothing is detrimental here. It's just, we're just talking about facts. And then we get to maneuver these facts and place them into our own personal stories in a way that feels best for us. When you're looking at the research, everything talks about deficits, executive functioning deficits, and it talks about your brain not working properly, it's wired improperly. And I think this is so damaging because if you think about how the brain works in a more like natural environment, so meaning if we think back to hunter-gatherer times or just times when not even that far, but just even a couple hundred years ago, when we were moving a lot more, we were walking everywhere, we were working together as a community, so there was always some kind of communal aspect. I think that our brains probably worked just fine in those environments. I think that the issues start to come more when we're trying to live in this modern world. So just keep that in mind that the word deficit, you'll see it a lot. And some people really hate the concept of like ADHD being a strength because they feel like it takes away the struggle from what it's like to live with ADHD in this society. But the conversation is not trying to take that away. It's trying to say, hey, there's actually nothing wrong with your brain per se. It's something wrong with the environment. So let's just shift our focus to the environment to reduce suffering rather than trying to willpower our way into changing our brain in a way that is probably just going to cause you more harm than good because you're fighting an uphill battle. Does anyone have any questions so far? Feel free to either unmute yourself or write it in the chat, or just even some thoughts that you're having as I'm saying some of this. The other thing that comes to mind for me, um, just like when our bodies are fatigued, we tend to blame the body, but the body is really the one who's smart. It knows that we need something like a nutrient or sleep, calories, oxygen to keep us moving. And if it's missing anything, it's going to try to make you stop moving by giving you fatigue, headaches, etc. That's why this mind-body connection that you're probably seeing a lot online, we have to be really careful when we start to talk about cures and making things. Yeah, there is a mind-body connection, but let's think about the chicken or the egg. One will impact the other. It doesn't mean one is the cause or the main issue. If you start to again, say you're depleted in vitamin D or B vitamins is a big one that goes along with energy. You might get a B12 shot, take B vitamins, and you might notice your energy start to increase, but then you might have these other habits in place that make life hard or just your environment makes life hard. And so then that might actually start to re-deplete your B vitamins because your body knows like this is more work than what it's worth it for me. And so we're going to make you more and more tired. We're going to actually leach out some more of these B vitamins because we don't feel you need them because you're not putting your energy in the right place according to your body. Again, I'm using you language, but it's not a you're at fault thing. It's just trying to take a look at the big picture and how our environment interacts with our body. So figuring out what we need can be tricky, but I do think it's our job to figure it out and not beat our heads against a wall trying to figure it out, but taking it slow and steady, one feedback piece at a time, learning to listen to our body. I've done workshops on that one. And yeah, just continuing to become friends with our body. When you have a symptom or you have a thing that you hate that's happening, pain, fatigue, inability to remember things, inability to stay motivated on a task, I just want you to try to shift your mindset from what's wrong with me to what's wrong with my environment. And then what can I change in my environment Possibly. And if you can't see anything right in that moment, that's okay. Just asking the question actually opens your ability to see more and more solutions. So we want to ask this question every day, really. You can ask it every day until you start to feel like you're gaining clarity. Okay. Enter the DOPA menu. Has anybody heard of this concept yet? If you have, just put a little thumbs up in your window. All right. Looks like we've got one. Okay. I'd love to know in the chat if you have used it, if you've actually filled one out for yourself, or if this will be the first time that you're looking more deeply into it. A DOPA menu is it's just a fun concept. This isn't in the research. This is just somebody had a really good idea to think about all of the things in our life that increase dopamine. And that's because dopamine is often seen as the key player in ADHD and chronic pain as well in a lot of different ways, although oxytocin is really big in chronic pain also. These dopamine is that what we the reason why I'm pausing with my definition of it is because I think that our definition is overly simplistic, but for the sake of teaching, it can also be good to teach it in a very simple way. So dopamine is that pleasure hormone. It's the thing that helps us feel pleasure. And there's so much that can be taught about dopamine that this workshop does not even cover. But what's important to remember here is that things that are enjoyable to us create more dopamine in our bodies. When you have ADHD, basically your brain isn't you might have a ton of dopamine floating around in your body, and ADHD brains tend to not have the ability to grasp that receptor, the dopamine, and to use it. So it does nothing basically. And a lot of ADHD medication helps you grasp it allows you to have more receptors in your brain so that you can grasp the dopamine that's floating around and therefore do the things that dopamine helps you do. Stay consistent, stay motivated, have energy, things like that. So the concept of a DOPA menu is basically if you think about a menu at a food restaurant, you have starters or appetizers, you have main courses, you have sides and desserts, and then you also have specials. Another way to think about this concept as we go through it is to think about dopamine stacking. How can you put two things together that give you a boost of dopamine? Put them together so that you can be more motivated. When we think about starters, again, like at a restaurant, there are these kind of quick things that you eat at the start of a meal, and they just taste good. They are nice to have. And so that's what on our DOPA menu, things that would be like quick and easy to give you a little bit of a boost to help you you can use this at the start of your day or during a break or to help you focus and center yourself in the middle of a project. This could be, we like to keep these around 10 minutes. So it could be like a short walk, journaling, it could be dancing, it could be even a quick game on your phone. You just probably want to set a timer because it's easy to get sucked into that. And you don't want to do something that's going to leave you more drained at the end of the 10 minutes. You want to do something that's genuinely going to give you a little bit of a boost. And this is why it's such a personal development process because what works for you isn't going to work for me. So we have to be figuring that out for you. And again, sometimes it's tricky. It might be, I really enjoy going for a walk, but maybe after 10 minutes, I feel depleted. And so therefore that wouldn't act as a starter. So it can be tricky figuring it out, but as you build your list, and in the workbook that I'm going to send out after this, you'll be able to have more guidance around actually physically writing down your list and figuring it out for yourself. Main courses, the things that really give you a ton of dopamine, and I think, again, the research tends to focus just on dopamine, but you can also think about the other key players like oxytocin, which is a love hormone, serotonin, which is linked to positive mood, things like that. The main courses are things that are longer activities that you really enjoy. These tend to be things that, especially if you live with chronic pain, because your energy is so limited and we tend to have so much on our to-do list all the time that just takes so much out of us, it's very easy to ignore the things that we enjoy or to get so sucked into them and being numbing ourselves with them and then not getting anything else done. So this is why this dopa menu is about, it has starters and main course, sides and desserts, because we need multiple of these categories, not just one thing. We don't want to just fall into one thing or else nothing else gets done. So if you're the type that tends to abandon the things that you really love to do, again, this could even be like a weekend vacation. Maybe you don't prioritize that because of money, because of time, whatever the reason is. Like a weekend in a cabin or something would be a really good example. So a main course is something that takes a lot longer than an appetizer, but it's just helpful to know that you have this in your schedule because, again, it increases motivation. And then you can use that energy and that motivation to do the things that are harder to do, but that are still important to you. Keep in mind, if you're trying to use some of this to hack your way into doing things that aren't important to you, but you feel like you just should be doing them, it's going to be a lot harder. We know that with ADHD, one of the main motivators is that the thing you're doing has to have some kind of importance or meaning to it. So that's another aspect to all of this, is figuring out what's important to you. Sometimes things are important simply because it's a have to do kind of thing. And other times it's important because it's pleasurable and it brings meaning to our life. And again, we have to keep playing with that and being open to reflecting on this process. Someone said in the chat, I tried to do a dopamine when I first heard about it, but stalled out when I couldn't think of things easily. I'm going to address this later on as well, because I'm the same way. When I first started journaling, I hated journaling because it just felt like I would get stuck. I would read these questions. It would ask me to, and there's no context to the question when you're just sitting down and writing like in a journal. It's basically like asking you to, it's like staring at a blank wall and then saying, paint the perfect picture here. But there's no context. You don't know anything about where this wall is. And so that's what I think for me, that's what happens around journaling. That's why I do a lot better with verbal processing and talking in a group with trusted people, so that it brings that context. And the artist's way really helped me with that. That's a really good idea. Okay, so side dishes in your dopa menu, these are the things that can accompany another task to make them more enjoyable. So you might listen to a podcast during a chore, while exercising, lighting a candle while you're working. These things can be very motivating or not very motivating. Again, it depends on your personal preferences. But for me, it tends to be, I'm a very social person. And so having somebody alongside me talking is usually the thing that's going to motivate me more than anything else. And that might be different for you. You might be much more motivated by the music on and nobody being around you. And then desserts are the things that are more enjoyable, but we want to do in moderation. So we don't want to overdo them. These might be coping skills that you often go to that leave you feeling more drained if you've done them for too long. So that would be like scrolling on social media, usually. It could be, yeah, binge watching TV. Like all of those things are appropriate. You can absolutely use that, and your dopamine. It might be more of like a reward, a special maybe, or you just have to be careful with so we want to be really aware of what's happening in our body when we're doing things that we find enjoyable. Is there a point when you are in the middle of doing something enjoyable that there's a drop off moment where this is no longer enjoyable, but now we're on autopilot and a little bit numbed out. And so we might not even realize that like this thing isn't enjoyable anymore, but we keep on doing it. And I think social media is probably the best example of that, because interestingly enough, dopamine is most released when you are anticipating something rather than when you're actually, and gaming, someone wrote in the chat, absolutely, yes. The screen just keeps you entranced, it keeps you going. And so it's very hard to come out of that. So again, it's not that it's bad to play games or to be online or to use screens. It's just, can you recognize when your body is actually no longer enjoying it? And that takes practice to figure out. And we're talking about screens. Screens get a bad rap, but if you grew up an avid reader, this could be the same thing with physical books. We can get entranced in a book, a really good story. can leave me wanting to read for hours and hours. And some days that's absolutely fine to do. Other days, the end of it, you feel again just drained and worn out. That's a sign that you probably did it too much. And then lastly, specials, just like on a menu at a restaurant, these things are few and far between. They're not the same every day. So this might be more of like the weekend trip, going to a beach, getting a massage. Although if you live with chronic pain, a massage actually might be more a part of maybe it's a weekly special. You can think about it that way. With both ADHD and chronic pain, we want to really remember, I think in the ADHD world, we talk a lot about rewards, and I don't love this concept. I don't love the idea of working really hard and then getting a reward. I much prefer the idea of being rewarded throughout an activity. And that doesn't mean I'm going to eat ice cream now or I'm going to reward myself with a shopping thing. No, we want it. What's rewarding to me might be different for you. But again, maybe in the middle of something, I take a break and I go get a hug from my partner. Maybe if that's what's really rewarding to me. Or maybe I pause and I do play a game in the middle of something because I need a break. And I'm going to reward myself while I'm on that break. I'm not just waiting until the end. When you wait all the way to the end, it tells your brain and your body that one, you're not worthy of enjoyment. And two, it teaches your body that you have to push, push, push before anything good can happen to you. And when you do that over and over again, your body learns to not trust you. It says, you're always pushing past my limits. And therefore, I don't really care about the reward you're going to give me at the end. It's not worth it. It's not enough because I'm depleted. So the other piece that's really important is incorporating meaningful tasks, including activities that contribute to your overall goals and values, even if they don't provide an immediate relief. And so I think this one's really hard too. It can be hard to motivate yourself to do the things that don't have an immediate reward or an immediate, um, don't give you something right away. That I think the dopamine menu helps you figure out how you can motivate yourself when there isn't an immediate reward, because a lot of the things that are good in life, in my opinion, are the things that don't give you immediate reward. So we want to build habits that, again, are not about willpower, but about finding what naturally motivates you. And that's what the dopamine menu does. In the workbook that I'm going to send you all after this, it's just a little bit more information about what we're talking about here. And then it will go into helping you actually write down and craft. But I think what's a big piece about this is, and it goes to the comment that was mentioned earlier about the comment said, I tried to do a dopamine menu when I first heard about it, but stalled out when I couldn't think of things easily. We want to start to write this list down when things naturally happen. So when I naturally notice a little boost of energy, I might pause. Now aware of it and I know to be looking for it, I might pause and then say, what just happened that gave me this little boost? And then I might write that down. And I might not know where it goes yet. I don't know if it's a starter, an appetizer, special, a main course. I might not. That's okay. I can just write it down like in a brain dump area. And then later on, had multiple experiences with that particular feeling, then I might have a better idea of where it goes in my dopamine menu. So it's not important to figure it out exactly. Oh, this thing goes exactly here. This one goes exactly here. That's not the most important part. The most important part is just starting to even know what it feels like to feel joy and to feel reward and to feel bonding and warmth in your body. Everything, whether it's other mental health diagnoses or chronic pain or ADHD, a combination of different treatments is always the most effective for all of these diagnoses. And when we're talking about treating ADHD or chronic pain, we're not talking about curing. ADHD is not a disorder, even though disorder is in the name here. It's just how our brains are wired and how we think doesn't always work with how society is. And so we're not treating our ADHD per se. We're actually figuring out how to get our brains and our bodies to work in tandem with the world so that there's this kind of reciprocal flow of back and forth reciprocity rather than just how do I fit myself in? How do I make myself work? How do I fix myself? We don't want to go down that. And so a lot of the treatment options look the same for both ADHD and chronic pain. We're looking at medicines, mindful awareness, and other skills kind of training, strengths-based therapy. So how do we look at what's going well already and then lean into that rather than constantly trying to fix what's wrong? And community. Our behaviors are often driven by what we witness around us. So having a community that actually mirrors what you want your life to look like, I think is the most important part of all of this. Okay. Any questions or thoughts so far on what we've gone over? Or are there any concepts over? Max, I think your comment might have gotten cut off. Either the piece you were talking about. Which piece are you referencing? You recognize what is happening. You see it, but then stopping is so hard. Are you talking about like when you're numbing out or like you're in something that's enjoyable? Yeah, okay. Yes. So when you're trying to learn new behaviors, habits, any of this stuff, the noticing piece is actually just the most important first step. So when you recognize what's happening, but you can't stop it, if you go to, I recognize what's happening and I can't stop it, and I'm a terrible person, if you go down that path, we actually stop all learning. That's why in therapy, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but I am a licensed therapist. This is not therapy. This is just education for you to then take to your therapist if this resonates with you and you can process further with them. But when we are recognizing what's happening, we have to be compassionate around that because it's actually how your brain learns. And in my opinion, I would say that self-compassion probably increases your oxytocin, your serotonin, even your dopamine. At the same time, this is that bidirectional approach. That's why you can't beat yourself up if you're not doing it well, like self-compassion. Um, Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, these things, when we have more of them in our brain, it's easier to tap into self-compassion. Although, again, with the community aspect, it's easiest to figure out how to have self-compassion or compassion for yourself when you see other people around you doing it, when they are compassionate and kind towards themselves and they're kind and compassionate towards you. When you are numbing out, so you're playing a game, you're reading a book, you're doing a thing, and you're like, I know I should get up and do something else. I would ask, should you or do you want to? Are you realizing that you're in this negative pattern because you actually want to be getting up and doing something else, but you feel stuck here physically? Or are you actually very much gaining enjoyment from what you're doing right now and long-term enjoy, like lasting effective enjoyment, but you feel like you should be doing something else? So that's one distinction. The other piece to that is when you notice it and you do want to get up and do something else, but you feel stuck, all we can do in this moment is just notice. And we might not be able to break through that wall right now in this moment, but the more we pay attention to it and allow it to be there without judging it, the next time it happens, it'll be a little bit easier. And then the next time, a little bit easier. If we can just stay strong with the self-compassion piece, if we can keep remembering that nothing's wrong with us, you actually give your brain a break. And it also, I didn't even talk about PDA, pathological demand avoidance. A better term for that would be persistent drive for autonomy, meaning we like to have autonomy in our choices. And so if you're playing a game and you're numbed out, or you're reading a book and you're numbed out and you can't figure out how to get up, piece of that might be that there's this part of you that is just avoiding the demand of it. So we want to go into low demand mode and say, it's okay. You're allowed to keep playing this game. You're allowed to keep doing this thing, and I'm not going to judge myself for it. Instead, can I tap into what feels good about this? Can I allow myself to physically feel what is so captivating about what I'm doing right now? And if you live with chronic pain, a lot of the times it's, oh, I actually don't feel a whole lot of pain right now because I'm absorbed into this game or this book or this thing I'm doing, and everything else is gone. And I'm able to just be here and not feel a lot of pain. That's going to be way more motivating than, I know I should do this thing, but as soon as I get up and do this thing, I'm going to be in pain. No one is around to support me. I'm feeling alone. Like all of the emotions start to flood in. It makes perfect sense why you're not doing the thing that you should. Once we start to validate that over and over and over again, we reduce the tension in our bodies, which then gives us an ability to think more clearly, which then allows us to actually problem solve this. Okay, all of that is true, but I still want to learn how to stop playing the game for 10 hours in a row. That's not helping me. I don't feel better after that. So what do I do here? We have to sit with it over and over again with compassion. And then again, our brain can think more clearly. And now we can come up with the actual solutions that are going to work for you. And when you figure out those solutions, then you write them into your dopamine menu. They have to be, when we're writing these solutions down, they have to be things that are truly motivating for you. They cannot be shoulds. Any thoughts on that or questions? So that's it for today's workshop. It's very simple, but also very, as I was putting this workshop together. Oh, thank you, Mags. I'm so glad to hear that. I was putting this workshop together and feeling like there's just not enough on here. This feels so short. But then I just remembered that this is a really big concept. And even though it sounds really simple, it's not. And so we have to break it down and just talk about one little small piece at a time, gain what we can from that, use it, and then hopefully, then over time, especially if you're bringing people into your community and figuring out what works for you, all of this does become so much easier, so much easier. I appreciate the positive feedback. Thank you all. And I do have a request for you. If you did gain something from this or any of my workshops, I would be really honored if you could leave a Google My Business review. Google reviews are really helpful in helping other people find my work. So if you can do that, I will send this link out in the follow-up with the work as well. Finding community. Anonymous, I did 2 workshops on just like asking for help and not feeling like a burden, which I can send those to you. If you send me an email, I can send them to you. Finding community is really hard to find, I think. And it's so much, it's not as simple as just going to meetup groups, or although that is a part of it, like going somewhere where you consistently show up and hopefully there's other people that consistently show up. In my neighborhood, there's something called First Friday, and we have a potluck every first Friday. A different person in the neighborhood hosts it. These were really unenjoyable for me when we first moved to this neighborhood. My husband loved going. I didn't. And so for a while, and this was when my pain was at its worst too. It's okay. It's already like 8 o'clock at night. I just want to be in bed. I don't want to go out right now. And also being around new people, I think is really hard. And especially if you have any sensory issues, social anxiety, all of these things start to make it harder and harder to socialize. So sometimes we have to figure out, what is the thing I'm going to focus on first in order to get myself out to these first Fridays. By the way, in order to go to them, I had to have an importance around them. It was important to me that my husband stayed social as well and that I was supporting that. And hopefully, and it did eventually, we could then reciprocally help each other. So I was showing up for him, and then he was also helping me show up for myself, because going to these first Fridays actually does do a lot for me socially now. But I had to figure out, okay, I know I'm always really tired, so maybe I can take a nap on these Fridays, like earlier in the day, or making sure that I wore the right shoes when my feet were really hurting a lot. Things like simple things like that then make it better and easier to show up to things that are really hard for you to show up. I also find that in large groups, I often feel like I'm socially awkward. So that was a big burden for me. It was a big obstacle for me. And so I had to do a lot of acceptance work around that. You know what? Some people are going to find me awkward. They just are, because not everybody clicks. I might say things that just rub people the wrong way, and I didn't mean to. And so I had to work on that a lot. That will happen. And there will also be people there that I do click with really well, and that I am able to form deeper and meaningful relationships with, and can have good conversations with. And it won't all be small talk, although I might have to endure some of that. And yeah, see in the chat. So hard to get past the burden feeling. Another piece of the socializing thing that's helped me is allowing yourself to leave whenever you need to. Yes. With the first Fridays that my husband and I go to, we often take 2 cars, because he likes to stay out later, and I am just like, I'm not doing well by 9 or 10 o'clock. I need to be asleep. So yeah, we take 2 cars and I leave early, and he gets to stay and enjoy. And yeah, you have to be able to leave whenever you want to. Awesome. All right. Any other questions about this or thoughts? Anything you wish you knew more about that maybe I could do a workshop on in the future? Awesome. Yeah, it's an ongoing process, guys. Don't beat yourself up if you can't figure it out. Yeah, great. Another workshop on everything saying here about like allowing, like what we were talking about, like allowing yourself to leave early and how to show up for places. Is that what you're thinking? Yeah, write that down. Awesome. Thanks so much, everyone. The replay to this. Oh, another thing I started doing with the social thing is just saying to people up front that I'm awkward. Yeah, it's very much. Yeah. How many people are like, oh my God, me too. I think that's a big thing. And that helps a lot. You start to realize, wait, people feel this. Not everyone, but a lot of people feel this way. And it helps you feel connected, relatable, helps you show up more. Yeah. Awesome. If you guys have any questions, or you think about something for the future that you want to see me present on, the next one that I'm doing is July 20th. It's going to be with a fellow therapist friend of mine, and how to name your feelings and how that can help with chronic pain. She has a 4-step process that we're going to be going over. And then also on August 17th, I will be bringing a naturopathic doctor who works up in Vermont, and which is like key real estate for Lyme disease. We're going to be talking about diagnosing, treating Lyme disease. And then if you are in Georgia, I am doing an in-person full day workshop. That one there won't be a free option, but if you do need a reduced rate, please let me know if you want to join, and it will be a full day workshop. So let me know if any of those are of interest to you, and I'll see you all at the next one. Thanks, Destiny. Thank you.